Hey guys, I'm back with another video, and this one's going to be how to play Magic. Hopefully it will help people, but I'm making this video assuming that the people watching do not know how to play at all. I'm going to go into all the details that people rarely talk about, like tapping your land to produce mana. So this video's probably going to be long, but I'm going to try to fly through it without rambling too much like I usually do. So we'll start with land. Alright, here are the 5 basic land types. We have a forest, green, swamp, the black one, island, the blue one, mountain, the red one, plains, the white one. They are our 5 basic elements in this game. So before I explain how their basic land, let me tell you a rule, the basics of deck building. You cannot have more than 4 of one single card with the same name in your deck. Now you can have more than 4 copies of cards that do the same thing, but they cannot have the same name. And that counts for foreign. So if you have a foreign card, it's still technically the same as its English card. So you cannot have more than 4. But there is a land type called basic land, and that is right here, basic land, and then it has its type, island. That defies the rule. You are allowed to have more than 4 if it is a basic island or if the effect otherwise states. There is a card called Relentless Rats, there may be more but I'm not aware of them, that will let you defy the rule and put more than 4 copies in. But as far as your basic land type, that rule doesn't apply. So you can have like 20 forests in one deck and it's fine. But if it does not say basic, for example, if it says just land, then it is not a basic land and you can only have 4. So, for example, out of a 60 card deck, I run 22 of these in my white artifact deck. But if I wanted to run these, I can only do 4. So, unlimited, 4. Unlimited, 4. Alright, on to the creatures. So if you're new to Magic, your entire deck is going to consist of mostly creatures. You're going to have like 25 land out of a 60 card deck, because you always want to make sure that you're going to have land to pay for your spells. So a creature spell, like all other spells, has a mana cost. That's right there. But, for example, this only costs 1 plains, 1 white mana. But there are going to be other things, like this, that cost 1 red mana, but they also have this little 2. That means you have to pay an additional 2, so a total of 3 mana, but the extra 2 can be paid for in any color. It does not have to be red. Only that has to be red. But the generic 2 can be a swamp or an island or anything. So we have the basic elements of Magic: black, green, blue, red, white. But we also have other things in Magic. This is colorless. It's an artifact creature. There are colorless cards that are not artifact too, but for this example it's artifact. That costs 2 generic mana. That means you can throw this guy in any deck you have and be able to pay for him. And he's a 1/2 with flying and vigilance. So it's a pretty good card, and sometimes when you're making decks you're going to want to use artifacts when you don't have a big collection yet. There are, lastly, multicolor spells. Now sometimes it has a half of a green and a half of a white mixed together. What that will mean is you can play for it with either or. So you can pay for it with white or green. But for this example, you have to pay 1 white and 1 green. So you cannot use any color you want. Alright, what should we do next? Let's do enchantments. So enchantments are kind of like creatures and planeswalkers in the sense that they're a permanent. So they stay on the field after you play them. There are a few different kinds though. You have cards like this that enchant a specific target. right there it says enchant creature. And then you have other ones like Journey to Nowhere that do not enchant a creature. You use their ability, but you do not. This does not get enchanted to anything. It just stays out on the battlefield, and you use its effect. All right. Another thing about this is if you have an enchantment that says, for example, whenever a creature you control attacks, tap target creature. Now, that's under your control. That enchantment comes into play on your field. So, only you get that effect. No other players get that effect unless the card specifically says all players get this effect. Alright, now we'll go on to artifacts. Alright, here are 3 examples of artifact. Keep in mind I'm leaving one other out, but it's not as common, which are artifact land, which means they're a land that also count as an artifact. Alright, we have regular artifacts, and what they do is you pay to bring them out and you put them on the battlefield and they just stay there. And for example, this guy has tap, add 2 to your mana pool, so you can get mana, and he doesn't die after you use it. After you use him, he just untaps, and then you get to use him again during your next turn, so they don't die. And the same thing goes for these. These are called equipments. Now you equip your creatures with them and they get bonuses, kind of like a sword. And again, they don't die when your creature dies. So if you have a creature and he's holding a sword and he gets killed, well, someone else can run by and pick it up and use it. That's kind of how these work. So you have the cost, and then you have to do the equip cost, and that will pay to put it on a creature. And then he gets the abilities of this card. Lastly, which I kind of already showed you in the creature section, we have artifact creatures. They count both as an artifact and a creature at the exact same time. So they could be targeted by things that target artifacts or creatures. So you want to keep that in mind when you're using them. Now we have 2 examples of instants and 2 examples of sorceries. So what the difference between instants and sorceries are is instants you can play at any time, including during your opponent's turns. And sorceries you can only use during your turn. Alright, now instant, it says right there. So this says counter target spell, and it costs 3. So for example, how an instant would work is, say they're playing a really big creature, it's like an 8/8 and you don't want them to bring it out. You can counter that spell. So you can counter the creature spell and it never comes into play, and you get to do it during their turn. Now, here's a sorcery. This says, you pay for it, and it says search your library for a card, put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. So, if they were playing a big creature, and you wanted to go get something out of your library to take care of it, you could not do it during their turn. You have to wait until it's your turn to use this. So, I don't know, I think that sums it up pretty good. But, just to explain one more, so if you have Lightning Bolt, and they're attacking you with a creature, you can use Lightning Bolt and deal 3 damage to that creature. And if they have 3 or less defense, then that will kill the creature and it will no longer be doing you any damage. So you stop it pretty much. And these are not permanents. So like enchantments and lands and creatures that stay out, these do not. You play them and then they go into the graveyard, as if they were just a spell you're shooting out of your hand magically, or however you want to picture it. Because an instant or a sorcery is usually powerful, and sometimes they have abilities like flashback that let you use them more than once, but typically you only get to use them once because they are a spell. They're not anything physical. Alright, and I think we got one last thing left. I was wrong. There's a couple more things I almost forgot. This is legendary. So, legendary creature. Let me show you up close. Legendary creature. So, the rule with legendary is if there are more than one of the same legendary card in play, they're all destroyed. So if you have a Lorthos, the Tidemaker, on your side of the battlefield, and your opponent brings out the same card, Lorthos, the Tidemaker, they both go to the graveyard because they're legendary, as in one of a kind. So it's against logic for there to be two of them. And it's not always going to be a creature. They have legendary artifacts, legendary enchantments, legendary creatures, etc. So keep that in mind. Legendary creatures are really good, but they do have that downside. So this is the last type of card there is. These are planeswalkers. They're not creatures and they're not enchantments or lands. They're their own complete type. They come into play onto the battlefield like any other permanent, but they have these things called loyalty points or something like that. And they also have abilities. So when you cast them, if they don't get countered, they come into play and they have 4, and then you can use one of these per turn. So you can go like +2 and use his first effect, or you can go -3 and use his second effect. So, for example, if you use his second effect, which is -3, that'll put him at 1 loyalty counter. Or royalty counter. I actually forget what it is. People just say, put it at 3 or put it at 4. So it don't matter. But another thing about these is they're like players. So people can attack them with their creatures. Like if they have a creature with 5 attack, they can say they can attack. And instead of doing the damage to you, it can be directed at Soren Markov, for example. But they can block to protect their own planeswalker if they want. So if someone's attacking you, and they want to hit your planeswalker or you, then you can either block the damage or let them hit it. But if his loyalty goes down to 0, he dies. Alright, am I forgetting anything about these? Oh yeah, the legend rule applies to them because they are like players. They're one of a kind. So if you have a Soren Markov out, and your opponent brings out a Soren Markov, they both die. They both go to the graveyard right away. So I'm going to have to cut the video short because I realized just how long it's going to be. So I went over the creature types, and hopefully that will help for now. But I still plan on doing the actual how to play and what things do, like how does First Strike interact with Death Touch, how does Lifelink interact with, I don't know, preventing damage or redirecting damage, just weird things like that I want to go over. So hopefully you stick around or check back, because I really think if you're a new player, this will help you a lot, because I'm going into a lot of the details of things that I needed help with when I first started playing. So yeah, do check back. Also, this is my cat 7. Anyways, thanks for watching. Bye.